The afternoon light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the downtown penthouse, painting geometric patterns across the hardwood floors. Victoria Hayes had just finished mopping. She straightened up, pressing one hand against the small of her aching back, and surveyed her work with quiet satisfaction. At 32, she'd been cleaning homes for nearly 5 years, and she'd learned to take pride in the small victories. Streak-free mirrors, gleaming countertops, the fresh scent of lemon polish hanging in the air. This particular penthouse belonged to Daniel Cross, a name she'd seen occasionally in the business section of newspapers left on cafe tables. In the 2 years she'd been cleaning his home, they'd barely exchanged more than polite nods and brief greetings. He was usually gone before she arrived at 1 o'clock, and he rarely returned before she left at 5. It was an arrangement that suited Victoria perfectly. She could work efficiently, listening to audiobooks through her earbuds while her daughter Lucy was at school, invisible in the way service workers so often were to the wealthy. Victoria was wiping down the granite kitchen island when she heard the front door open. She glanced at the clock on the stove, 2:15. Her heart skipped slightly. In 2 years, Daniel Cross had never come home early. She pulled out her earbuds and turned toward the entryway, ready to apologize for still being there, to gather her supplies and disappear. But the man who walked through the door stopped her words before they could form. Daniel Cross was always immaculately presented when she saw him leaving in the mornings from her arrival. Tailored suits, perfectly knotted ties, dark hair styled with precision, posture radiating confidence. The man before her now looked like he'd been through a storm. His suit jacket was missing, his white dress shirt wrinkled and partially untucked, his tie hanging loose around his neck like a noose he'd tried to escape. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They carried a weight that made something twist in her chest. Exhaustion, yes, but something deeper. Defeat. Mr. Cross, Victoria said softly, setting down her cloth. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you'd be home early. I can finish up quickly and get out of your way. Daniel looked up as if only just noticing her presence. For a long moment, he simply stared, and Victoria felt an uncomfortable heat rise to her cheeks under his gaze. There was something different in the way he looked at her now, not through her, but at her. Really seeing her. Victoria, he said, his voice rougher than she'd ever heard it. I need to talk to you about something. Something important. Victoria's hands instinctively clutched the cleaning cloth tighter. If this is about my work, I can adjust my schedule. Or if you need to make changes... It's not about your work, Daniel interrupted. Your work is perfect. You're perfect at what you do. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying what remained of its usual careful styling. Please, can we sit down? This is going to sound completely insane, but I need you to hear me out. Every instinct told Victoria to decline politely, to finish her work and leave, to maintain the comfortable distance between employer and employee. But something in his voice, a note of genuine desperation, made her hesitate. Against her better judgment, she followed him to the living room. They sat on opposite ends of the charcoal gray sofa, an expensive piece she'd always been careful to clean with the exact products specified by its manufacturer. Now sitting on it felt surreal, wrong somehow. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. 6 months ago, he began without preamble, I lost everything. My company, my investments, my savings. All of it gone. Victoria blinked, confused. The penthouse around them screamed wealth and success. I don't understand. You still live here? Everything seems... I own this place outright, thank God, Daniel said. It's all that's left. Everything else, the business I spent 15 years building, the portfolio worth millions, destroyed by bad investments and partners who betrayed me when things started going south. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. My wife divorced me 4 months ago. Miranda took what liquid assets I had left and disappeared. Turns out she was in love with my bank account, not me. Victoria felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. She knew what betrayal felt like, knew intimately what it meant to be abandoned by someone who promised to stay. Lucy's father had walked out when she was 6 months pregnant, leaving nothing but debt and broken promises. I'm sorry, she said sincerely. That's terrible. But Mr. Cross, I still don't understand why you're telling me this. Daniel finally looked directly at her, and what Victoria saw in his eyes made her breath catch. Raw vulnerability, the kind of honest desperation that stripped away all social pretense and left only naked need. "In 4 hours," he said, "3 investors are coming here. These men have the capital to help me rebuild everything. They think I'm still the successful businessman they read about in Forbes 2 years ago. They think I have a stable life, a solid marriage, a foundation to build on." He paused, his jaw working. "If they find out the truth that I'm divorced, broke, and barely keeping this place, they'll walk away. Desperate men don't get investments. They get pity or they get exploited." Victoria's heart began to hammer in her chest. She could sense where this was heading, and everything in her wanted to run. "What exactly are you asking me?" Daniel moved closer on the sofa, close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes she'd never noticed before. Close enough to smell his cologne, something woodsy and expensive that made her head swim slightly. "I'm asking you to pretend to be my wife," he said, the words tumbling out fast. "Just for tonight, just for this one meeting. I need them to see stability. I need them to see a man who has his life together, who has someone by his side who believes in him." He leaned even closer. "Victoria, I know this is crazy. I know I have no right to ask you this, but I'm begging you. This is my last chance to rebuild. If I don't get this investment, I'll have to sell this place, and I'll have nothing left." Victoria stood abruptly, her mind reeling. "Mr. Cross, I can't. This is insane. I'm your housekeeper. I clean your toilets. I'm nobody. They'll see right through this. You're not nobody," Daniel said fiercely, standing to face her. The intensity in his voice made her take a step back. "You're real. You're genuine. And right now, you're the only person in my life who doesn't want something from me, who doesn't see me as a failure or a mark." He took a breath. "I'll pay you $20,000 for 4 hours of your time." $20,000. The number echoed in Victoria's mind like a bell. That was 6 months of rent. That was Lucy's asthma medication for 2 years. That was the dental work Victoria had been putting off because she couldn't afford it. That was breathing room, safety, a cushion against the constant anxiety that kept her awake at night. "I don't know," she whispered. "What if I mess everything up? What if they can tell I'm not who you say I am? I don't know anything about your business or your life or how to act like someone who belongs in a place like this." "You won't mess up," Daniel insisted. "Just be yourself. Just be the kind, intelligent, capable woman you are. That's all I need you to be." He paused. "You're more graceful and genuine than Miranda ever was, and she grew up in this world." Victoria's mind raced through possibilities and consequences. This was wrong on so many levels. It was deceptive, risky, potentially disastrous. But $20,000 for Lucy, for them. "Just tonight," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "Just this one meeting. After that, everything goes back to normal." The relief that flooded Daniel's face was so complete, so overwhelming, that he looked like a different person. "Yes, just tonight. Just this one meeting. I promise." He reached out and took her hand, and the touch sent an unexpected jolt through Victoria's entire body. His hand was warm and strong, his grip both gentle and firm. "Thank you, Victoria. You have no idea what this means to me." For just a moment, looking into his grateful eyes, Victoria felt something shift inside her, something dangerous and complicated. She pushed the feeling away quickly. "We should prepare," Daniel said, releasing her hand with what seemed like reluctance. "I need to tell you some basic information about my business, about our supposed life together." He paused. "And Victoria, from now until the meeting ends, you should call me Daniel. Not Mr. Cross. Can you do that?" Victoria nodded, her throat suddenly tight. "Yes, Daniel." The way his name felt on her lips was intimate, forbidden. As he led her to his study to begin their preparation, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something far more complicated than a simple business arrangement. She had agreed to pretend to be his wife for 4 hours. What she didn't know yet was that some pretenses have a way of becoming dangerously, beautifully real. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of information and transformation. Daniel sat across from Victoria at his mahogany desk, filling her in on the essential details of his business, his background, how they supposedly met. But as they talked, the conversation kept drifting into unexpected territory. "Tell me about Lucy," Daniel said during a break, pouring them both coffee from the expensive machine in his kitchen. "If these investors ask about her, I should know more than just her name and age." Victoria felt her shoulders relax slightly at the mention of her daughter. "She's 8, smart as a whip, loves reading more than anything. She wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up." A smile touched her lips. "Last week she tried to rescue a pigeon with a broken wing. Kept it in a shoebox in our apartment for 2 days before I convinced her it needed professional help." "She sounds wonderful," Daniel said, and there was something genuine in his voice that made Victoria look up. "You've raised her alone all this time?" "Her father left before she was born," Victoria said, the old pain barely a whisper now. "Turned out he wasn't interested in being a parent. So yes, it's been just us, me and Lucy against the world." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "That takes incredible strength." "It takes not having a choice," Victoria replied. "You do what you have to do for your child." "No," Daniel said firmly. "Plenty of people have no choice and still give up." "You didn't. That's strength." Their eyes met. And Victoria felt that dangerous shift again, that sense of walls crumbling that she'd worked so hard to build. "We should talk about your dress," Daniel said, breaking the moment. "I don't mean any offense, but you'll need something more formal for tonight." Victoria looked down at her worn jeans and faded t-shirt, feeling a flush of embarrassment. "I don't have anything like what your actual wife would wear." "Then we'll get you something," Daniel said. "There's a boutique 2 blocks from here. The owner owes me a favor. We can be there and back in an hour." "Daniel, I can't let you buy me clothes. The money you're paying me is already too much." "Consider it a costume for the role," he said. "Besides, you'll need shoes too, and maybe we should do something with your hair." Victoria's hand flew self-consciously to her hair, which she'd pulled back in a simple ponytail. "What's wrong with my hair?" "Nothing's wrong with it," Daniel said quickly. "But Miranda always wore hers up for formal dinners. Some kind of elegant twist thing. I don't know what it's called, but it looked complicated." An hour later, Victoria stood in front of the full-length mirror in Daniel's bedroom, barely recognizing herself. The boutique owner, a stylish woman named Francesca, had worked magic. The dress was deep emerald green, fitted but not tight, with a neckline that was elegant rather than revealing. It made Victoria's dark eyes look almost luminous, brought out the olive undertones in her skin that she'd inherited from her grandmother. Francesca had also insisted on doing her hair and makeup, transforming Victoria's simple ponytail into an intricate updo with a few loose tendrils framing her face. The makeup was subtle but somehow made her look polished. "Sophisticated." "You look beautiful," Daniel said from the doorway, and Victoria turned to find him staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. He'd changed into a fresh suit, charcoal gray with a deep blue tie, and looked every inch the successful businessman again. "I look like I'm playing dress-up," Victoria said, but her protest was weak. The truth was, she felt beautiful, and that scared her. "You look like you belong," Daniel said softly. "Like you were always meant to be here." Before Victoria could respond, the doorbell rang. Her heart jumped into her throat. "They're early," Daniel muttered, checking his watch. "Okay, remember, we've been married for 3 years. We met at a charity fundraiser. You were working as an event coordinator." He crossed to her quickly, taking both her hands. "Victoria, breathe. You can do this. Just follow my lead and be yourself." The 3 investors who entered were studies in contrasts. Robert Sterling was the oldest, perhaps 55, with distinguished gray hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Patrick Monroe was younger, early 40s, with an easy smile and relaxed demeanor. The third man, Jason Webb, was around Daniel's age, quiet and analytical, the type who spoke little but missed nothing. "Gentlemen," Daniel said smoothly, his entire demeanor transformed from the desperate man Victoria had seen hours earlier. "Welcome. I'd like you to meet my wife, Victoria." Victoria extended her hand, summoning a smile that felt surprisingly natural. "It's wonderful to meet you all. Daniel's been looking forward to this evening." For the next hour, they gathered in the living room while Daniel presented his business proposal. Victoria listened with genuine fascination as he outlined his vision for a platform that would streamline supply chain management for small to medium-sized businesses. He was passionate, articulate, brilliant. She found herself leaning forward, caught up in his enthusiasm. "The market is underserved," Daniel was saying. "The big players ignore small businesses because the profit margins seem too slim. But if you aggregate thousands of small businesses, provide them with tools they can actually afford, you create a massive market with incredible loyalty. And what makes you think you can succeed where others have failed?" Jason Webb asked, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. "Because I've failed already," Daniel said without hesitation. "I know what doesn't work. I know the mistakes to avoid. And I'm not trying to build an empire anymore. I'm trying to build something sustainable, something meaningful." The catering service Daniel had hired delivered dinner promptly at 7. As they moved to the dining table, the conversation shifted to more personal topics. Robert Sterling turned to Victoria with friendly curiosity. "So, Victoria, Daniel's been quite private about his personal life. How did you two meet?" Victoria glanced at Daniel, remembering the story they'd rehearsed. But when she spoke, she found herself adding layers of truth to the fiction. "It was unexpected," she said softly. "I was working, trying to make ends meet as a single mother. Daniel saw something in me that I didn't see in myself." She looked at him and found him watching her intently. He looked past all the things that usually define people, past the circumstances and the struggles, and saw who I really was underneath. That changed everything. It wasn't entirely a lie. In those moments this afternoon, when Daniel had asked for her help, when he'd called her capable and genuine, something had shifted in how she viewed herself. Daniel reached over and took her hand on the table, the gesture appearing natural to their audience. But Victoria felt the slight tremor in his fingers, felt the way his thumb brushed across her knuckles in a way that seemed less like acting and more like something real. "Victoria has a daughter," Daniel added, his voice warm. "Lucy. She's 8 years old and absolutely brilliant. She's teaching me that there's more to life than business strategies and profit margins." "Family is everything," Robert Sterling said, nodding approvingly. "I've seen too many brilliant businessmen fail because they didn't have stability at home. It's clear you two have built something solid together. That's the foundation we look for in our partners." The meeting ended around 10 with handshakes and promises to review the proposal over the next few days. As the door closed behind the investors, Victoria felt her legs nearly give out from the tension she'd been holding for hours. "We did it," Daniel breathed, turning to her with genuine amazement in his eyes. "Victoria, you were incredible." "Absolutely incredible. The way you spoke, the way you handled yourself. I think they actually believed every word." "It felt easier than I expected," Victoria admitted. "Some of it almost felt—" She trailed off, not wanting to finish that thought. "Real?" Daniel supplied softly. Their eyes met, and the air between them suddenly felt charged with something neither wanted to name. Daniel stepped closer, his hand reaching up as if to touch her face. Victoria's breath caught. Then his phone rang, shattering the moment like glass. Daniel answered it, his expression growing serious. "Yes, I understand. Thank you for calling." When he hung up, he looked at Victoria with a mixture of excitement and worry. "That was Robert Sterling. He's very impressed. He wants to have dinner with us next Friday at his home." Daniel paused. He specifically mentioned that he and his wife would love to meet Lucy. Victoria felt panic rise in her chest like a tide. "Daniel, no. This was supposed to be one night. You promised." "I know," he said desperately. "But Victoria, they're seriously interested. Robert Sterling doesn't invite potential partners to his home unless he's ready to move forward. If I can just maintain this a little longer, just until the contract is signed, then we can stage a quiet separation. No one will question it. Business partnerships outlast marriages all the time." He moved closer. "Please, I'll pay you $30,000. And it's just one dinner. One more evening, $30,000. Victoria thought of the leak in Lucy's bedroom ceiling that got worse every time it rained. She thought of the car that was one breakdown away from death, leaving them dependent on unreliable buses. She thought of all the small dreams she'd set aside because they seemed impossible. Lucy's college fund, a savings account, maybe even a vacation someday. One more dinner, Victoria heard herself say. But Daniel, my daughter cannot be hurt by this. She's already been abandoned by one man. I won't let her get attached to someone who's going to disappear from her life. I would never hurt Lucy, Daniel said with surprising intensity. I promise you that. As Victoria gathered her things to leave, Daniel caught her hand one more time. Thank you, he said quietly, for taking a chance on me. Driving home in her aging Honda, still wearing the emerald dress, Victoria caught sight of herself in the rearview mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back, and she realized with a sinking feeling that the danger wasn't just about Lucy getting attached. She was already starting to care about Daniel Cross, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. The week that followed felt surreal to Victoria. Daniel called her Tuesday morning, ostensibly to coordinate details for the Friday dinner at Robert Sterling's home, but their conversation wandered far beyond logistics. Tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with being a mother, Daniel said. Something just for you. Victoria was folding laundry in her small apartment, phone tucked between her shoulder and ear. The question caught her off guard. I don't know. Everything in my life revolves around Lucy. There must be something, Daniel pressed. A dream you had before she was born. Something you still think about. Victoria set down the t-shirt she was folding, staring out the window at the brick wall of the building next door. I wanted to be a teacher, she said finally. English literature. I was 2 years into my degree when I got pregnant. Had to drop out to work, she laughed softly. I still read constantly, though. Lucy thinks I'm crazy with how many books I bring home from the library. What are you reading now? Poetry, actually. Mary Oliver. There's this one line that keeps running through my head. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Victoria paused. I'm 32, and sometimes I feel like I haven't really lived yet. Like I've been so busy surviving that I forgot to actually exist. I know exactly what you mean, Daniel said quietly. I spent 15 years building a company, and I can't remember a single moment from any of it that felt truly alive. It was all just momentum and ambition and fear of failure. They talked for nearly 2 hours. When Victoria finally hung up, Lucy looked at her curiously from where she was doing homework at their small kitchen table. Who was that, Mom? You never talk on the phone that long. Just a friend, Victoria said, feeling heat rise to her cheeks at the lie. Wednesday, Daniel invited Victoria for coffee to prepare for the dinner. They met at a quiet cafe downtown, and Daniel slid a folder across the table. What's this? Victoria asked. Background information on Robert and Margaret Sterling. Their interests, their children's names, places they've traveled. If we're going to convince them we're a real couple, we need to seem knowledgeable about our friends' lives. But after 10 minutes of reviewing the documents, their conversation drifted again. Daniel asked about Lucy's school, about Victoria's day, about the books she loved. Victoria found herself telling him about her younger sister, Nina, who was in graduate school studying architecture, about their parents who'd passed away in a car accident when Victoria was 23. That's when I really learned I was alone, Victoria said. Lucy's father had already left, my parents were gone, and Nina was still in undergrad. It was just me and this tiny baby, and I was terrified every single day that I was going to fail her. But you didn't, Daniel said. You've given her a good life. I've given her a struggling life, Victoria corrected. She shares a bedroom with me because we can't afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Her winter coat is from a thrift store. I'm 32 years old, and I clean other people's toilets for a living. Stop, Daniel said firmly. You're 32 years old, and you've raised a brilliant, happy child completely on your own while working hard enough to keep a roof over her head and food on the table. Do you have any idea how remarkable that is? Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. You barely know me. I know enough, Daniel said softly. I know you're stronger than anyone I've ever met. Their eyes held across the small table, and Victoria felt something in her chest crack open, something she'd kept locked away for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Thursday evening, Daniel called again. This time, Lucy answered Victoria's phone before she could stop her. Hello? Lucy's small voice said. Oh, hi. Yes, she's here. Who are you? A pause. Daniel? My mom's friend Daniel? Another pause, and then Lucy's face lit up with a smile that made Victoria's heart clench. She talks about you too. Okay, here she is. Lucy handed over the phone with a knowing look that was far too mature for 8 years old. Your friend Daniel, she said with exaggerated innocence. Hey, Victoria said, feeling her face burn. Sorry about that. Don't apologize, Daniel said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. She sounds wonderful. I'm looking forward to meeting her tomorrow. Daniel, Victoria said carefully, you need to understand something. Lucy's going to like you. She's desperate for a father figure, even though she'd never admit it. And when this is over, when you're out of our lives, it's going to hurt her. What makes you so sure I'll want to be out of your lives? Daniel asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them. Victoria didn't know how to answer it. Friday arrived too quickly. Victoria spent the afternoon preparing Lucy, trying to explain the situation without revealing the deception. So your friend Daniel is taking us to dinner? Lucy asked, struggling with the zipper on the dress Victoria had bought her that morning. Another gift from Daniel that Victoria had initially refused before his insistence. Yes, with some of his business associates. It's important that we make a good impression. Why? Lucy asked with the directness of childhood. Because Daniel needs their help with something important, Victoria said carefully. And sometimes in life we help people we care about. Do you care about Daniel? Lucy asked. Victoria looked at her daughter's curious face and couldn't bring herself to lie. Yes, honey, I do. Robert and Margaret Sterling's home was in the suburbs, a sprawling estate that made Daniel's penthouse look modest by comparison. Margaret met them at the door, a warm woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an immediate smile for Lucy. You must be Lucy, Margaret said. I've heard wonderful things about you. Do you like dogs? We have 3 golden retrievers in the backyard. Lucy's face lit up with pure joy. I love dogs. Come on, then, Margaret said, extending her hand. Let's go meet them before dinner. As Lucy disappeared with Margaret, Victoria felt Daniel's hand settle on the small of her back, a gesture of support that sent warmth through her entire body. The dinner table seated 8. In addition to Robert and Margaret, their adult son Christopher was there with his wife Bethany, and Jason Webb had brought his wife Hannah. The conversation flowed easily, talk of business mixing with personal stories and laughter. Lucy was on her best behavior, using her napkin properly and answering questions politely. But it was the way Daniel interacted with her that made Victoria's carefully constructed walls begin to crumble completely. So, Lucy, Daniel said during the main course, your mom tells me you want to be a veterinarian. What made you decide that? Lucy's eyes brightened. Animals need help, and most people don't pay attention to them. I want to be someone who pays attention. That's very thoughtful, Daniel said seriously, treating her answer with the respect he'd give an adult. What's your favorite animal? Wolves, Lucy said immediately. They're loyal to their pack. They protect each other. Daniel glanced at Victoria, and she saw understanding flash in his eyes. Lucy's answer wasn't really about wolves at all. After dinner, Margaret pulled Victoria aside in the kitchen while the men talked business, and Lucy played with the dogs in the backyard, visible through the large windows. Daniel is wonderful with your daughter, Margaret observed, pouring them both wine. You can always tell a man's true character by how he treats children who aren't his own. He's a good man, Victoria heard herself say, and realized she meant it completely. Robert told me about Daniel's troubles, Margaret continued. The business collapse, the divorce. I admire how he's handling it. No bitterness, no excuses. Just determination to rebuild, she smiled at Victoria. And finding you in the midst of all that chaos. That's not luck. That's fate. Victoria felt guilt twist in her stomach, but before she could respond, she heard raised voices from the living room. She and Margaret hurried out to find Daniel facing a man Victoria didn't recognize, tension crackling between them. The stranger was tall, polished, with slicked-back blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Daniel, he was saying, what a surprise to find you here. I thought you'd be living in a studio apartment by now. Trevor, Daniel said, his voice tight. What are you doing here? Trevor's my nephew. Robert said carefully, looking between the two men. He's in town for business. I invited him to stop by. Robert's expression was troubled. I take it you two know each other? Trevor was my business partner, Daniel said flatly. Before he emptied our accounts and disappeared with $3 million. The room went silent. Trevor's smile widened. Now, Daniel, let's not rewrite history. I took what I was owed before your sinking ship dragged me down with it. You committed fraud? Daniel said, his hands clenching into fists. I made a smart business decision, Trevor countered. Unlike you, I knew when to cut my losses. His eyes slid to Victoria, assessing. Although I see you've landed on your feet. New wife, new potential investors. How convenient. Tell me, does Robert know that your previous wife divorced you less than 5 months ago? Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. Lucy had come in from the backyard and was standing near the window, watching everything with wide, frightened eyes. That's enough, Robert said sharply. Trevor, I think you should leave. I'm just asking questions, Trevor said innocently. For instance, I'm curious how Daniel affords this lovely emerald dress his wife is wearing, given that he's supposedly broke. And I'm wondering about the timeline here. When exactly did you two meet? Daniel moved forward, and for a moment Victoria thought he might actually hit Trevor. But instead he spoke with icy control. My relationship with Victoria is none of your business. What is your business is the fraud charges I'll be filing on Monday morning. Good luck with that, Trevor said. You'll need proof, and last I checked, all the records were lost in your company's spectacular collapse. He turned to Robert. Uncle, I'd be very careful about this investment. Daniel's judgment has proven questionable at best. Trevor left, but the damage was done. The evening ended awkwardly, with promises to be in touch that sounded hollow. In the car ride home, Lucy was quiet in the back seat, and Victoria couldn't bring herself to look at Daniel. When they pulled up to Victoria's apartment building, Lucy got out quickly. I'll go inside, Mom, she said, her voice small. Lucy, wait! Daniel started, but she was already gone, the building door closing behind her. Victoria turned to Daniel and found him staring straight ahead, jaw clenched. I'm sorry, he said finally. I should have known Trevor would try something like this. I should have protected you from this. It's not your fault, Victoria said, but her voice was flat. Isn't it? Daniel looked at her finally, and the anguish in his eyes made her breath catch. I dragged you into this. I put you and Lucy in this position. And now Trevor's going to investigate, and he's going to find out the truth, and everything's going to fall apart. Then maybe it should, Victoria said quietly. Maybe this was a terrible idea from the start. Do you really believe that? Daniel asked. Do you really think these past 2 weeks have been a mistake? Victoria's throat tightened. The truth was, the past 2 weeks had been some of the best of her life, talking to Daniel, laughing with him, feeling seen and valued in a way she never had before. But that wasn't real. It was built on lies. I need to go check on Lucy, she said, reaching for the door handle. Daniel caught her hand. Victoria, wait, please. I know this is complicated, and I know I've made things messy. But what I feel for you, what's happening between us, that's not fake. Tell me you feel it too. Victoria looked at their joined hands, at the way his thumb was brushing across her knuckles. She thought about the conversations, the laughter, the way her heart raced whenever he called. She thought about Lucy's bright eyes at dinner, about how natural they'd all looked together like a real family. It doesn't matter what I feel, she said finally. Because this isn't real, Daniel. It's a borrowed life, and borrowed things always have to be given back. She pulled her hand away and got out of the car. As she walked toward her building, she heard Daniel call her name, but she didn't turn around. Inside the apartment, she found Lucy sitting on their shared bed, still in her dress, tears streaming down her face. He's going to leave, isn't he? Lucy whispered. Just like Dad. I heard what that man said. About Daniel's wife leaving him. Were you lying to me, Mom? Is Daniel your boyfriend, not just your friend? Victoria sat beside her daughter and pulled her close. It's complicated, baby. I didn't mean to lie to you. I liked him. Lucy sobbed against Victoria's shoulder. I thought maybe he could be my dad. I thought maybe we could be a real family. Victoria held her daughter and felt tears slip down her own cheeks. She'd been trying so hard to protect Lucy, and instead, She'd set them both up for heartbreak. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "I'm not giving up on this. On you. On us." Victoria stared at the message, wanting desperately to believe it could be true. But borrowed lives don't become real ones, no matter how much you wish they would. Or do they?